From KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Headlines and video images from across Colorado and the West this week illustrate a brutal reality. Wildfires are deadly, and so is the work of fighting them. News of 3 casualties in the Snyder fire west of Grand Junction drove home that sentiment earlier this week. 3 wildland firefighters who had traveled to Colorado died fighting that blaze. So today on In The NoCo, we're looking at the story from a different angle. We want to hear about how wildland firefighters protect themselves in the worst of circumstances. Timothy Inglesby is a former wildland firefighter based in Oregon. He is now executive director of the nonprofit Firefighters United for Safety, Ethics, and Ecology. He talked with me about the tools and techniques firefighters use to give themselves a fighting chance in a deadly scenario. Here is that conversation. Now, you're a former firefighter who advocates for mental health services for active firefighters. I'm wondering, Timothy, what goes through your mind as you see images and headlines about firefighters battling and dying in huge blazes in the western U.S. right now?
Well, folks need to realize that there are inherent safety risks and health hazards in fighting fires. You can't completely prevent them or avoid them, but you can mitigate for them. And the safety risks go beyond just risks to life and limb. It includes lungs as well. It includes health hazards. Firefighters are exposed to all kinds of toxic substances in their equipment, their uniforms, their food, smoke inhalation. And there's also mental health hazards too, traumatic incidents that will stick with them for a lifetime.
I want to talk about how firefighters get themselves out of extreme danger. One of the tools that they have for the most dire situations is called a fire shelter. And we've read that the 3 firefighters who died in western Colorado a few days ago deployed these shelters. What does a fire shelter look like, and how do they work to protect firefighters?
Fire shelters look, when they're deployed, like metallic pup tents, folded up tightly, and they're packed on the back of the hip of firefighters. But in case of emergency, they can take them out, crawl inside, and then hug the ground. They do a reasonably effective job of repelling radiant heat. They can't withstand prolonged direct contact with flames or the massive hot air and gases that can envelop an area. So they are a tool of last resort when everything else has failed.
I read a statistic that said fire shelters have saved around 300 lives since they were made mandatory, I believe, in the late 1970s. But tragically, of course, they don't work in every situation. Could you talk about when they just aren't enough?
I believe that to be true. A lot more lives were saved with the use of the fire shelter. In some places, you have to have a really good seal with the ground. If you're on a talus field full of rocks and there's gaps, then the hot air and gases can seep right into the fire shelter and you can succumb to that. Or often there's extreme high winds and embers, and you've got falling limbs or even trees, and those also impact the fire shelter. Prolonged heat. So the fire shelter doesn't work in all cases, but in the cases that it does, there's a lot more people who survive these incidents because of them.
They save lives, but they have their limitations. As we mentioned, there are a number of wildfires burning right now in western states, including Colorado. What are your thoughts as you look at what's happening?
Well, the whole wildland fire community has been bracing for this season. Just the environmental conditions are extreme for these large-scale, long-duration, high-intensity, fast-moving wildfires. And it started early this year. In Florida, swamps were burning, and it's kind of migrated westward. And the trend has been very long fire seasons. We'll be engaging this clear into the late fall, perhaps through the winter, in fact. We're living in the age of reckoning with climate change. And with all this extra heat and drought and storms, we're just going to get a lot more wildfire activity. So that's one thing, the environmental conditions primed. But bizarrely, while wildfire activity is surging, The wildland fire workforce has been shrinking under policies set by the current administration to downsize federal workforce, including many firefighters or essential support staff that help aid fire operations. So fewer people are going to be asked to be doing a lot more, and at some point, we're going to reach a breaking point. Our hearts go out to all the friends, families, co-workers, communities of the 3 victims of the Snyder Fire tragedy, but I fear it won't be the last of these tragedy fires.
Well, Timothy, we've spent this interview talking about how firefighters put themselves in extreme danger at a very high level. Do you think we need to fight fires differently so that we see fewer deaths like those we saw last week in Western Colorado?
Absolutely. We need to shift our paradigm entirely so we're not just doing reactive wildfire suppression, we're doing proactive ecological fire management. And it is better to be working with fire under those conditions where we have more control over its behavior and can actually achieve beneficial effects than to fighting against it in these extreme conditions of weather and fuels and terrain. And so that's the problem we have with too many of the wrong kinds of fire in the wrong times, places, and conditions, and not enough of the right kinds of fire in the right times, places, and conditions. And we can get those latter kinds of fires, beneficial fires, by proactively managing for them.
And what would that look like? Are we talking about forest thinning, more prescribed burns?
It would entail a lot of activities, a lot of arduous physical labor just suited for young people. The work should begin with making sure everyone's home and community is safe from whatever kinds of fires. So it means making sure that the roofs don't catch fire from embers, sweeping the mats of dead needles off the roof, pruning shrubs, scraping against the walls. But again, in choosing the times and places to work with fire and apply fire, that's far more safer for the crews, far less expenses for taxpayers, and far less damaging to the land. In fact, ultimately benefits the land. It would be doing a lot of work in early spring, late fall, over the winter, and less of this emergency crisis response during the heat of summer. And this isn't just some utopian wish for the future, it's the legacy of Native people and their stewardship of landscapes with fire. And so that's the hope. And I have a lot of hope that will happen.
Timothy Inglesby, a former wildland firefighter based in Oregon and executive director of the nonprofit Firefighters United for Safety, Ethics, and Ecology. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you so much. And everyone, hug a firefighter where you can.
Seriously. Timothy Inglesby spoke with me about how to keep firefighters safer as several large and deadly blazes are burning in Colorado and other western states. We'll have links to our fire coverage in the show notes and at KUNC.org. That's it today for In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Thanks so much for listening.